they're so afraid of scaring off these mythical moderate Republicans or like this coalition of imaginary white people who they think they need to court instead of thinking about, well, what issues are impacting, Black and brown people who are working to keep this country running. It's like they just take it for granted that Black folks and people of color are going to vote for them. So they're like, okay, what can we say that won't scare off, everyone's dad, like everyone's rich uncle?
I think what's so crazy about this is it's so extreme that I don't even think it's going to scare off everybody's dad, who's probably like a sausage meeting dad and like, wherever they're trying to, in Ohio. I think they want to have clean meat. Like, I think they don't want to get sick. I mean, it just seems so apparent. The egregiousness of Trump, the just, like you said, cruelty to, if Biden wanted to be like talking about civility and honor, then he could have tapped into that stuff easily and said, this is a guy who like wants you to get sick. Because
all they want to talk about is they're obsessed with this idea of the white working class, which is not even the majority of the working class anymore in this country. If you pay attention to people who work, and is all of the speeches I saw from the Biden Democrat world was like, we're not going to take away fracking, or like we're going to bring back a factory maybe. It's like, okay, well, like what do you have to offer food service workers and retail workers and utilities workers and sex workers and incarcerated workers? Like, it's not just white guys in hard hats like my dad, and he voted for Trump anyway. Like, the working class is not a monolith. The labor movement is not a monolith, and they keep trying to sell themselves to this sort of like Reagan era 70s 80s stereotype of what a union worker is, and it's just not like that anymore.
It's not like that anymore, but the states that they want to win, it's more like that than it is in say Nevada, or which obviously he needed to win. We're seeing now. Let's shift a little bit to California, because this is infuriating. Prop 22, which, well, actually we've covered on the show, but do you want to describe what Prop 22 is?
God, it's breaking my heart is what it is. It's this ballot measure, which is now going to be a law in California, that was advanced by lobbyists or by executives from Uber and Lyft and Postmates and Instacart. Essentially, they want to create this sort of third classification for workers. Right now we have employees full-time, and we have independent contractors, and then they want to create this sort of terrible middle ground for gig workers, mm-hmm. for people that work for these companies who are quite clearly employees, but the companies do not want to acknowledge them as such, because then they would have to follow labor laws, pay them wages, pay them benefits. They would have to treat them like people. Right. And these Silicon Valley vampires do not want to do that, because they can buy maybe one less yacht a year. So they advanced this ballot measure called Prop 22, and they went about it in such an insidious way. They wreathed it in the language of social justice, and they tried to paint it as this positive thing that's going to help workers and lift them up and take care of people. And they spent $200 million on advertising, on lobbyists. They used in-app advertising. So like if you're in California,
right, like, yeah, explain.
Yeah, if you're in California, you need to take an Uber to go drop off your grandma's groceries. Like, a little message would come up about Prop 22 saying, hey, this is good, vote for this. They required their drivers it would pop up wherever you ride. Their drivers would have to acknowledge Prop 22, yes or okay. They used every possible thing in their arsenal to get this passed, to coerce workers and to coerce customers into thinking this is good. I'm being a good person by voting for this. And, there was a really robust effort mounted by unions and workers and labor activists saying like, no, this isn't okay. This is going to set a dangerous precedent. This isn't actually going to help us. Please don't vote for this. But I think they raised about 10 million versus 200 million and a monopoly on the messaging. And it's just heartbreaking, because it's these wealthy Silicon Valley app-based tech bosses bought themselves a law. And that's some Gilded Age stuff, right? That's some robber baron vibes. Yeah. So they bought themselves a law, and now it has the thing that's terrible. It's terrible already. But the thing that is deeply concerning is that now they saw, okay, that worked. They're going to try to replicate that success across the country and on a federal level. And if we get to that point, that is going to hurt so many people who already do not have proper labor protections and do not have any benefits and are barely scraping by. No one's driving Lyft for fun anymore, you know?
So this is California, obviously, which is has a supermajority. Who are the Democrats, if you have some off the top of your head, that were complicit with this? Because this is quite aggressively clear that Democrats were on board with this proposition. And of course, it didn't move through the legislature, but the fact that you're in California and Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley is represented by Democrats. And that also, just side of that, I think what's really fascinating is that they're using the data that they produce in Silicon Valley to push and basically brainwash. I mean, we have like advertising standards in this country, and they have completely gone deeper into like the technology that they're building and providing that is algorithmic, like they can target folks based on the data that they have to, I mean, at no cost probably, right?
Right. I mean, if you have an engineer on salary who can make it happen, they'll make it. Though I think there was an Uber engineer who quit over this because he was being asked to work on this project, and he felt it was immoral. Yeah, I'd have to fact check me on that. But I saw that and was like, this is the kind of thing that you need. People that work at these companies do hold power, and they need to be using it to help people that don't have that power. I don't have a list of Democrats on the top of my head. I try to ignore them as much as possible, which is difficult as a labor reporter.
Yeah.
But I know that the law it raked in some high-profile progressive and Democratic endorsements from people that maybe either they didn't read the law closely or they felt that it would behoove them to play that middle ground between, oh, we have these workers that don't have any money. We have these tech people that have a lot of money. Maybe we can make everyone happy. And obviously you cannot, because that is the tension of capitalism.
It's infuriating. What do you think about the labor movement in California? It's a state that seems like it has a stronger movement, just from appearance. You've got nurses in California, domestic workers. There's quite a few different movements in California. And I mean, is it probably one of the stronger labor movements in the country?
I would have to say so, because they have the benefit of having a very blue local government, right? And that always helps. Yeah. But there's also such a massive population of workers there, especially workers of color and immigrant workers. And obviously, the United Farm Workers have been out there for decades trying to organize and trying to force change. Right. We have the garment workers in LA who are being asked to, make masks in sweatshops, and people are trying to organize with them. California is huge and it's diverse, and it does give me a lot of hope in terms of what we could do for the labor movement. I have a lot of friends in the labor movement out there, and they're very inspiring, and I love them very much. And I feel bad for them right now because of what's happening. And I think California is someplace that labor needs to be paying a lot of attention to. We talk a lot about the Midwest and about, the movements in the middle of the country in the so-called Rust Belt, but There's a lot happening on the coast too.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the labor force right now in the midst of COVID, right, and this current economic recession, possibly depression. What I find fascinating about this emerging labor movement, as opposed to the one that the press likes, the white working class Rust Belt-y type that you're talking about, is from domestic workers to healthcare workers, education workers, flight attendants. These are movements, these are unions that are all female-led and majority female made up, and many, if not the majority collectively, maybe not so in like teachers and flight attendants, are folks that are immigrants, maybe even depends on the field, but documented or not, or previously undocumented. I mean, it's just a really fascinating force, and they're also on the front lines of this pandemic. So, I mean, are you hearing anything from these unions about organizing collectively, maybe a strike, a general strike, as a pushback against the failures of all leadership in actually protecting these workers in the midst of a pandemic?
I mean, you mentioned the flight attendants. One of my personal heroes right now is Sarah Nelson, the president of the AFA-CWA. Talking about general strikes, she sort of set that recent ball in motion in 2019 during the government shutdown, when at a meeting of AFL-CIO leaders, she raised the idea. It was like, look, we're suffering. We have this nuclear option we could pull out. Let's not take it off the table. And now the idea of a general strike has been percolating for the past year. A lot of it is people talking on Twitter, a lot of wishful thinking. But actually, I just had a piece come out in the Baffler earlier this week about the fact that there are local labor councils in a variety of states and cities who have passed resolutions and made noises about the fact that, if, Trump is clearly trying to steal the election, but if he really goes for it, that they're not taking a general strike off the table either. In Seattle and Chicago, which, the Seattle teachers or the Chicago Teachers Union, you do not mess with them.
Yeah.
That is just a cardinal rule. And in Rochester and Troy and Vermont, that one hasn't passed yet. There's a lot of activity around that. And to your point about unions that are predominantly made up of women and women of color, look at what Unite Here has been doing, the hospitality workers union. Mm-hmm. When the pandemic hit, 98% of their members were laid off. 98 for real. That number is it's unfathomable. But and this is more on the electoral side, but if you look at the fact that there are states like Nevada and Georgia in play right now, Unite Here has launched a gigantic canvassing operation. They've been fighting extremely hard to elect this Democratic candidate because they see him as someone who will hopefully help. Because this is thousands upon thousands of people who don't have jobs anymore and don't have anyone looking out for them. And they're pushing the needle in the direction where they need it to go. There's so much power in this movement outside of electoral, in the middle of electoral. It's just, the labor movement is huge and it is powerful, and it's been knocked down and beaten up and had its knees cut out from under it. But I don't think that it can ever truly be conquered because we all work, and there's a labor leader within every worker, I think.
Thanks for watching and listening to The Nomiki Show. But remember to click like and subscribe on YouTube, and please share on social media. If you're not already a patron, please join us for as low as $5 a month on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show for early and special content. That investment makes a huge difference. We are not corporate media raking in the dough. It's really you guys that are keeping us going. So please consider being a patron. And to our current patrons, thank you so much. We are incredibly grateful to you. We also now have swag. So check us out on thenomikishow.com to get your mugs, your totes, and your stickers.